I have an announcement to make, Andrew said, tapping his wine glass with a spoon. The conversation around my parents' crowded dinner table quieted as everyone turned toward my husband of 7 years. I watched his face carefully, noting the slight tremor in his hand, the way his eyes darted toward my sister Jenna, before settling somewhere above everyone's heads. My heart beat steadily, betraying none of the knowledge I'd been carrying for months. Vivian and I are getting divorced, he continued, his voice growing firmer. I hadn't planned to announce it this way, but since everyone's together... My mother gasped. Aunt Patricia placed a hand over her heart. My father's bushy eyebrows drew together in confusion. There's more, Andrew added, reaching across the table to take Jenna's hand. Jenna and I have fallen in love. We've been trying to fight it for years, but sometimes love chooses you. The shocked silence that followed was broken only by my mother's whispered, "Oh my God." All eyes turned to me, awaiting the inevitable breakdown, tears, screaming, perhaps the throwing of my mother's good china. Instead, I nodded calmly and said, "Please, everyone, check your emails right now." I'm Vivian Hayes, 32 years old, currently employed as a digital forensics specialist for a cybersecurity firm in Seattle. My job involves reconstructing digital evidence, tracking electronic footprints, and documenting digital patterns of behavior. I'm good at what I do, methodical, thorough, and patient. What I wanted was simple, a loving marriage built on honesty and mutual respect. Standing in my way were my husband Andrew and my younger sister Jenna, who had apparently decided that their happiness was worth sacrificing mine. The injustice wasn't just their affair, it was the elaborate deception that accompanied it. The lies told not just to me but to our entire family. The rewriting of our shared history to justify their betrayal. The assumption that I would play the role of blindsided victim in their carefully constructed narrative. Emails? Andrew asked, confusion flickering across his face. What emails? I sent them just before dinner, I replied, pulling out my own phone. Everyone should have received them by now. Around the table, family members hesitantly reached for their phones. My cousin David was the first to open his email, his eyes widening as he scrolled through the contents. My mother followed, her hand flying to her mouth as she gasped for the second time that evening. What have you done? Jenna hissed, her face paling as she grabbed her own phone. Andrew looked increasingly uneasy, glancing between me and his still unopened email. Vivian, whatever this is... It's just documentation, I said evenly. Something I'm particularly good at. As more family members opened their emails, the expressions around the table transformed from shock at the announcement to something darker. Disapproval, anger, and disappointment directed not at me, but at Andrew and Jenna. What none of them realized yet was that the emails they were reading contained only a fraction of the evidence I had compiled. The full depth of the betrayal was far worse than anyone at this table, except perhaps Andrew and Jenna, could possibly imagine. Andrew and I met during a charity fundraiser for the Seattle Children's Hospital 8 years ago. He was a pediatric anesthesiologist, dedicated and compassionate. I was there representing my company, which had donated cybersecurity services to the hospital. Our connection was immediate and intense. Within a year, we were married in a small ceremony in my parents' backyard. Those early years were beautiful. We bought a craftsman bungalow in Queen Anne and spent weekends renovating it together. Andrew's work schedule was demanding, but he'd always make time for us. Surprise weekend getaways, cooking elaborate Sunday breakfasts, leaving little notes in my laptop bag. I'd never felt more secure or more loved. Jenna had always been the restless one in our family, dropping out of college twice, moving between cities, and changing careers with dizzying frequency. When she moved back to Seattle 3 years ago after another failed attempt at finding herself in Denver, I was the one who suggested she stay with us until she found her footing. Andrew was hesitant at first. Are you sure? It might change our dynamic, he said. She's my sister, I replied. Family helps family. What was meant to be a 2-month stay stretched into 6. Jenna quickly found a job at a local art gallery, but claimed she couldn't afford Seattle's rental prices. I didn't mind. I'd always wanted to be closer to my sister, and her presence seemed to fill a gap I hadn't realized existed in our home. Looking back, I see the warning signs I missed. How Andrew began working later shifts, how Jenna would run errands that took hours longer than they should have, how they developed inside jokes I wasn't part of, the occasional tension that would fill a room when I entered, as if I'd interrupted something. "You two seem to get along well," my mother commented during a family barbecue, watching Andrew help Jenna set up a badminton net. "Why wouldn't they?" I'd replied, genuinely puzzled. Mom shrugged. "Some men don't get along with their in-laws, you're lucky." I was lucky, I thought. My husband and sister had become friends. Our house felt more alive with Jenna's energy. If Andrew sometimes seemed distant, I attributed it to work stress. If Jenna occasionally watched him with a strange intensity, I dismissed it as my imagination. Even after Jenna finally moved into her own apartment, she remained a constant presence in our lives. Sunday dinners, impromptu movie nights, calls for help with household repairs that apparently couldn't wait until I got home from work. "You're too trusting," my friend Heather told me once after witnessing Jenna call Andrew for the third time during our lunch. "I wouldn't let my sister get that comfortable with my husband." I had laughed it off. Jenna's just needy. Besides, it's Andrew. The implication was clear. Andrew would never betray me. He was too honest, too devoted, too good. If I occasionally caught him looking at an incoming text and quickly putting his phone away, I told myself not to be paranoid. If he and Jenna sometimes fell silent when I entered a room, I assured myself it was coincidence. Trust, after all, was the foundation of our marriage. The discovery came by accident, as these things often do. 6 months ago, I was using Andrew's laptop to order takeout while he was at work. When I opened the browser, it automatically restored his previous session, including his email. I wasn't looking for anything. I had no suspicions compelling me to snoop. But there it was, a series of messages between Andrew and Jenna, explicit and unambiguous. "Last night was amazing," Jenna had written. "I can't stop thinking about you." "We need to be more careful," Andrew replied. "I don't want to hurt Viv." I read through the entire thread with a strange detachment, as if I were examining evidence for a case at work rather than witnessing the collapse of my marriage. The emails stretched back over 2 years, 2 years of deception, carrying on right under my nose. I closed the laptop without ordering dinner. When Andrew came home that night, I searched his face for signs of the stranger I'd discovered. Some indication that the man who kissed my forehead and asked about my day was the same one who had written those messages to my sister. But he looked exactly the same. "You okay?" he asked, noticing my quietness. "Rough day at work?" "Just tired," I replied, watching him carefully. How easily the lie came to him, how comfortably he moved through our home, our life, while maintaining this secret. Over the next few days, I found myself oscillating between numbness and devastating pain. I would wake up at 3 a.m., heart racing, wondering how I had missed the signs. During daylight hours, I functioned on autopilot, going to work, making dinner, engaging in conversations that now felt scripted and hollow. I didn't confront them immediately. A part of me hoped there was an explanation, something that would make sense of the incomprehensible. Perhaps the emails were just fantasy, never acted upon. Perhaps Andrew had been manipulated somehow. Perhaps I had misunderstood the context. But professional habits die hard. I began documenting, almost unconsciously at first. I noted when Andrew claimed to be working late, but his location showed elsewhere. I logged accidental encounters between him and Jenna that seemed too frequent to be coincidence. I matched credit card statements with hotel bookings and restaurant charges. The evidence mounted, irrefutable and heartbreaking. Not only were they having an affair, but they were extraordinarily careless about it, as if they didn't expect me to notice, or perhaps didn't care if I did. 2 weeks after my initial discovery, I found myself sitting in my car outside an upscale hotel downtown. watching Andrew and Jenna enter together. They were laughing, his hand resting intimately on the small of her back. I took photos mechanically, adding them to my growing file. That night, Andrew came home late, claiming an emergency surgery had kept him at the hospital. I nodded, served him reheated dinner, and listened to his elaborate fiction about a child with a ruptured appendix. "You look exhausted," I said, studying the faint smudge of lipstick on his collar, Jenna's shade. "It was intense," he agreed, reaching for my hand across the table. "But I'm home now." The tenderness of the gesture nearly broke me. In that moment, I realized I was living with a perfect stranger, someone capable of looking me in the eye while constructing an alternate reality. The man I had married, the sister I had grown up with, neither existed as I had believed. I withdrew my hand gently. "You should get some rest." That night, as Andrew slept beside me, I made my decision. I wouldn't confront them yet. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of my tears or rage. I would continue gathering evidence, building my case methodically and thoroughly. And when the time came to reveal what I knew, it wouldn't be in private, where they could manage the narrative. It would be public, irrefutable, and completely on my terms. For the next 2 months, I lived a double life. During the day, I was Vivian Hayes, devoted wife and loving sister. I attended family gatherings, maintained our home, and continued the routines of our marriage with robotic precision. At night, I became a detective in my own life, meticulously documenting the web of lies that surrounded me. The more I uncovered, the more elaborate their deception proved to be. They had created a shared digital calendar with coded entries to coordinate their meetings. They had a joint credit card I never knew about, used exclusively for their rendezvous. They had even discussed future plans, vacations they would take, a house they hoped to buy, once they figured out the Vivian situation. My first attempt at confrontation came after 3 months of surveillance. I approached it strategically, choosing a moment when Andrew was vulnerable, tired after a long shift, slightly mellowed by a glass of wine. "I think we should talk about Jenna," I said casually as we sat on the porch swing one evening. His body tensed infinitesimally. "What about her?" "I've noticed you two seem close." Andrew laughed, the sound slightly forced. "She's your sister. Of course we're close." "No, I mean really close, Andrew." I held his gaze steadily. "Is there something you want to tell me?" For a moment, I thought he might confess. Something flickered in his eyes, recognition, perhaps even guilt. Then his expression hardened. "I don't know what you're suggesting, but I don't appreciate it," he said coolly. "Jenna is family. If you're feeling insecure about something, that's on you." The swift denial and redirection, casting me as the irrational, jealous wife, was so smooth it almost made me doubt my own evidence. Almost. My next approach was more direct. I left browser windows open to hotel confirmations, placed my documented timeline where he might accidentally discover it. Each time, Andrew found ways to explain away the evidence or simply ignored it completely. Meanwhile, Jenna launched her own counteroffensive. She began calling me more frequently, suggesting sister activities with artificial enthusiasm. She introduced me to single men at gallery events, commenting how "Andrew and I both think you work too much. You should date more." The casual cruelty of trying to set me up while sleeping with my husband was breathtaking. The most painful revelation came from my mother, who innocently mentioned that Jenna had been helping Andrew plan something special for your anniversary. "She's been so secretive about it," Mom said. "But she mentioned they've been working on the surprise for months." Our anniversary was still 4 months away. The idea that they were using it as cover for their meetings, involving my own mother in their fiction, crystallized something inside me. This wasn't just an affair. It was a systematic campaign to manipulate everyone around us. I decided to force the issue. One evening, I deliberately left evidence of their affair, hotel receipts, screenshots of their messages, on the kitchen counter where Andrew would find them. When he came home, I waited in the living room, prepared for the confrontation that would finally bring everything into the open. Hours passed. Finally, Andrew entered, his expression grave. "We need to talk," he said, sitting across from me. "Yes, we do," I agreed, feeling a strange sense of relief that the charade was ending. "I found something disturbing," he continued, placing a folder on the coffee table between us. I reached for it, expecting to see the evidence I had left for him. Instead, I found printed emails between me and a colleague from work, innocent messages discussing a project, edited to appear romantic and incriminating. "I know about David," Andrew said, his voice tight with manufactured pain. "How long has this been going on?" The moment was so surreal I almost laughed. He had fabricated evidence of an affair to accuse me, a perfect distraction from his own betrayal. "There's nothing going on with David," I said calmly. "Those messages are about work, and you know it." "They seem pretty intimate to me," he countered. "All those late nights at the office, it makes sense now." I realized with startling clarity that he wasn't just deflecting. He was setting up his justification, creating a narrative where my imagined infidelity had driven him into Jenna's arms. The calculated nature of it chilled me to the bone. "I think we should take some time apart," he said, reaching for my hand with practiced concern. "This isn't healthy for either of us." In that moment, I understood. Direct confrontation would never work. Andrew and Jenna had invested too much in their version of reality. They would deny, deflect, and distort the truth until their fiction became the accepted narrative. Time apart might be good, I agreed, watching relief flood his features. He hadn't expected me to concede so easily. "I'm glad you understand," he said, squeezing my hand. "This isn't about blame. Sometimes people just grow apart." His practiced sympathy was almost admirable. I wondered how many times he'd rehearsed this conversation with Jenna, perfecting his concerned expression in her bathroom mirror. "Nah, I'll stay with Jenna while we figure things out," he continued. "She offered her guest room when I told her about the situation." Of course she had. I nodded, playing my assigned role in their script while mentally shifting to a new phase of my investigation. If Andrew thought my acquiescence meant surrender, he was gravely mistaken. The following week, as Andrew moved some of his things to Jenna's apartment, I took a personal day from work. While they believed I was at the office, I visited a private investigator recommended by a colleague. Douglas Parker specialized in infidelity cases and had testified in hundreds of divorce proceedings. "I'm not looking to hire you," I explained, spreading my evidence across his desk. "I need a professional assessment of what I've gathered and advice on what else I might need." Douglas reviewed my documentation with impressed surprise. "Most clients come to me with suspicions. You've brought a complete case file." "It's what I do for a living," I replied. "Just not usually in my personal life." He confirmed what I already suspected. My evidence was compelling, but could potentially be explained away in isolation. He recommended additional documentation, financial records showing patterns of deception, witness statements from hotel staff, and most importantly, evidence of their intent to mislead rather than just the affair itself. "Intent is powerful in divorce proceedings," he advised. "If you can prove they deliberately plan to deceive you and others, it strengthens your position considerably." I left his office with renewed purpose and a list of resources. Over the next month, I expanded my investigation beyond just documenting the affair. I uncovered financial deceptions I hadn't previously detected. Andrew had been diverting money from our joint savings to a private account for nearly a year. Jenna had charged expenses to my credit card on multiple occasions when I had loaned it to her for emergencies. The most stunning discovery came through Andrew's cloud storage, which automatically backed up his text messages. I found conversations between him and Jenna discussing me in cruel, dismissive terms, mocking my trust, planning how they would present their relationship to our family after the inevitable divorce. "She's so caught up in her work, she hasn't noticed a thing," Andrew had written. "We could probably have sex on the kitchen counter while she's typing away in the next room." "She'll probably thank us for making the decision for her," Jenna replied. "She never really knew how to be a proper wife anyway." Reading their casual cruelty transformed something within me. The numbness that had protected me gave way to a cold, clarifying anger. This wasn't just betrayal. It was systematic emotional abuse, a coordinated effort to undermine my reality while preserving their self-image. I began preparing for the endgame. Divorce was inevitable, but it would happen on my terms, not theirs. I consulted with Diana Wright, the most respected divorce attorney in Seattle, who reviewed my evidence with clinical precision. "This is exceptional documentation," she said. "Most clients bring me tissues and accusations. You've brought receipts, literal and figurative." "What should I expect?" I asked. "With what you've provided. A favorable settlement, certainly, but Washington is a no-fault state. The courts won't punish them for the affair itself." "I'm not looking for legal punishment," I clarified. "I want the truth recognized. I want their narrative dismantled." Diana studied me thoughtfully. "The court of public opinion can be more punishing than any legal judgment. If that's your aim, you need to consider carefully how and when you present this evidence." Her words crystallized my approach. Andrew and Jenna had orchestrated a public fiction. The appropriate response was public truth, delivered in a way they couldn't control or rewrite. As I left Diana's office, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Family dinner at our house this Sunday, your father's birthday. Andrew and Jenna both confirmed. Please come, don't make it awkward." The perfect stage had presented itself. All the players would be gathered, expecting to manage the narrative of my failing marriage and their blossoming love. They had no idea I was no longer following their script. I spent the next 3 days meticulously preparing my presentation. Each email was tailored to its recipient, containing only the information relevant to them. For my father, evidence of how Andrew had borrowed money from him, while simultaneously diverting funds to his secret account. For my mother, proof of how Jenna had used her to establish alibis. For my aunts and cousins, documentation of the specific lies told to each of them. The final touch was a master email to myself that contained everything: the complete timeline, all evidence, and a detailed account of my discovery process. This would be my reference during the inevitable chaos that would follow my revelation. On Sunday morning, I woke with strange serenity. I dressed carefully in a simple blue dress that Andrew had always complimented. I styled my hair, applied light makeup, and adorned myself with the pearl earrings my grandmother had left me, a talisman of her strength that I desperately needed. As I prepared to leave, my phone chimed with a text from Jenna. "Just checking you're coming tonight. Dad would be heartbroken if you didn't show. We're all family, after all." The casual audacity nearly broke my composure. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that in a few hours, their fiction would collapse under the weight of irrefutable evidence. I arrived at my parents' home precisely on time, bearing a homemade cake and a carefully wrapped gift for my father. The familiar sounds of family gathering enveloped me as I stepped inside. Laughter from the living room, the clatter of dishes in the kitchen, the low murmur of sports commentary from the television. Andrew and Jenna were already there, seated side by side on the sofa. They had maintained a pretense of casual friendship in family settings, but now, with the truth of their relationship about to be unveiled, they sat slightly closer than before, testing the waters of their public couplehood. "Vivian," my mother greeted me with a tight hug. "I'm so glad you came. This means so much to your father." I returned her embrace, breathing in her familiar perfume, wondering how she would look at me after reading my email, if she would recognize the strength it had taken to endure these months of deception. The dinner proceeded with excruciating normalcy. We ate my mother's pot roast and discussed safe topics: the weather, my cousin's new baby, my father's retirement plans. I participated mechanically, watching Andrew and Jenna exchange glances across the table, clearly anticipating the moment they had planned. As dessert was served, Andrew cleared his throat and tapped his glass. I felt a chill of déjà vu, recognizing the gesture from countless family gatherings when he'd made announcements: job promotions, our engagement, the purchase of our home. Moments that had once filled me with pride now revealed as steps in a relationship built on quicksand. What I hadn't anticipated was a last-minute complication. Just as Andrew began to speak, my phone buzzed with an alert from my email scheduling system. Delivery failed, server error. A quick check confirmed my worst fear. The carefully timed emails had not been sent. While Andrew launched into his prepared speech about difficult decisions and unexpected love, I frantically tried to resend the emails. The server response was clear. Temporary outage, estimated recovery time unknown. I felt a moment of pure panic. My entire plan hinged on those emails arriving simultaneously with Andrew's announcement. Without them, I would indeed be cast as the blindsided, pitiful wife they expected me to be. Andrew was reaching the climax of his speech, his hand now openly holding Jenna's. My family watched with expressions ranging from shock to discomfort to pity, exactly the reaction they had anticipated. I had seconds to decide. Walk out in apparent defeat? Confront them without my evidence? Neither option was acceptable. As Andrew uttered the words, "Jenna and I have fallen in love," I realized there was a third option. I had brought my laptop as backup. All the evidence was there, organized and ready. With calm determination, I opened it under the table and navigated to my email program. As Andrew finished speaking and all eyes turned expectantly toward me, I pressed send on a single email to everyone present, with all attachments included. "Please, everyone," I said into the stunned silence, "check your emails right now." The choreography of the next few moments was almost beautiful in its precision. Phones chimed in succession around the table as my email arrived. Confused glances were exchanged before, one by one, family members opened the message. "I've prepared some additional context for Andrew's announcement," I explained calmly, watching Andrew's confident smile falter. "Just some documentation I thought everyone should have." My father was the first to react, his face darkening as he scrolled through his phone. My cousin David whispered, "Holy shit," under his breath. My mother set her phone down with trembling hands, looking between Jenna and me with dawning horror. "What is this?" Andrew demanded, reaching for his own phone. "It's the truth," I replied simply. "Everything I've discovered over the past 6 months, organized for clarity, hotel receipts, text messages, financial records, the complete history of your relationship with my sister." Jenna lunged for her phone, her face draining of color as she opened the email. "These are private conversations. You had no right—" "They're conversations about me," I corrected. "About how to deceive me. About how pathetic and oblivious I am. I particularly enjoyed the exchange where you discussed whether to tell me before or after Christmas, and decided that ruining her holiday would be cruel." Andrew was frantically scrolling through the evidence, his planned narrative of star-crossed lovers disintegrating with each swipe. "This is invasion of privacy," he sputtered. "You can't just—" "Actually, I can," I interrupted. "Washington is a one-party consent state for recordings. Our shared accounts were, well, shared. And most of this information was gathered from devices and accounts you left open, often in our home." The room had fallen into stunned silence, broken only by the occasional gasp as someone reached a particularly damning piece of evidence. "You planned to announce this tonight," I continued, my voice steady. "You choreographed this moment to control the narrative. The reluctant lovers, the difficult decision, the clean break. You just didn't expect me to have a narrative of my own." My mother found her voice first. "Jenna, how could you do this to your sister?" It was happening, the shift in perception I had worked for months to achieve. The rewriting of their carefully constructed fiction. Andrew attempted damage control, his doctor's authority surfacing as he tried to regain command of the situation. "This is clearly Vivian's way of processing a difficult transition," he said, adopting a clinical tone. "She's created this elaborate—" "Stop talking, Andrew," my father interrupted, his voice ice cold. "My daughter doesn't fabricate evidence. It's her literal profession." Jenna shifted to tears, her go-to strategy when confronted. "I never meant to hurt anyone," she sobbed. "It just happened. You can't control who you fall in love with. According to your texts, my cousin David interjected, holding up his phone, you've been planning this for over 2 years. That's not just happening. The chorus of condemnation grew as more family members processed what they were reading. Aunt Patricia was comforting my mother, who couldn't stop staring at Jenna as if seeing a stranger. Uncle James was asking Andrew pointed questions about financial discrepancies mentioned in the emails. I remained silent, watching the natural consequences unfold. After months of documentation, analysis, and preparation, there was nothing more I needed to say. The evidence spoke for itself, clear and irrefutable. I gathered my purse and stood. I should go, I said quietly. Dad, I'm sorry about your birthday dinner. My father stood immediately. I'll walk you out. Outside, he hugged me fiercely. I had no idea what you've been going through, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Why didn't you tell us sooner? I needed to understand it first, I explained, and I needed everyone else to understand it too, not just believe me. As I drove away, my phone lit up with messages from family members, expressions of support, shock, and solidarity. I turned it off, welcoming the silence. The next morning, I filed for divorce. Andrew and Jenna's attempts to control the narrative had collapsed completely, not through dramatic confrontation, but through the methodical presentation of truth. 3 months later, as I signed the final divorce papers, my lawyer asked if I felt satisfied with the outcome. I don't feel satisfaction, I replied honestly, just clarity. I had built a career uncovering digital evidence of human behavior. I never imagined my greatest case would be documenting my own unraveling marriage. But professionals use the tools they have, and in the end, methodical documentation had accomplished what emotional confrontation never could. It had replaced deception with truth. That evening, I packed the last of my belongings and moved into my new apartment overlooking Puget Sound. As the sun set over the water, I deleted the investigation files from my computer, the final step in a process that had consumed nearly a year of my life. Tomorrow would be the first page of a new chapter, one written entirely in my own hand.